Hi. Interviewing software developers is one of the most interesting challenges there are for a team leader, in my opinion. You have a limited amount of time to understand who is the person who sits in front of you, what is their technical level, how will their communication with you and your team be? Are they motivated? These are just a few of the questions you'll need to answer in the short amount of time you have. Before we start the process of hiring a candidate together, I would like to give you one insight I have about measuring how good a developer is. There are three main factors in my view for that. The first is technical level. How good are they at actually writing code and understanding how stuff works? The second is motivation. How much effort are they willing to invest in order to succeed in their role? And the third is intelligence. How intelligent are they? When some new requirement comes up, how long will it take them to understand it? How deeply do they understand the technologies they're working with? The important thing to realize about these 3 points is that they are ordered in the order of how hard it is to change them. If you hire someone who is not very familiar with some technology, it will be relatively easy to teach them what they need to know. If you hire someone that isn't motivated to succeed, it will usually be much harder to change that and make them motivated. If you hire someone that is not an intelligent person, it will probably be impossible to change that. And so I'm looking for someone who is intelligent, highly motivated, and technically strong. And in that order. Okay, so let's start finding the ultimate candidate. The first stage is a phone interview. I wouldn't want to waste the candidate's or my time if I can tell they're not a fit by asking a few simple questions. What I'm trying to find out in the phone interview is whether or not the candidate can speak about their field of expertise intelligently. And the way I'm doing that is by asking them abstract questions about the technologies they work with, according to their resume. So I'll ask them questions like, what's Angular? Why should I use it instead of just vanilla JavaScript? What features does it have? What other alternatives do you know that can achieve what Angular is meant to achieve? These questions, which are not very technical in the sense that they do not require an IDE to answer, are a good way to start a conversation, and they show me the candidate's perception beyond their technical low-level tasks. It shows how much they know about the bigger picture and, more importantly, how they think about it. For me, that's meaningful. Many times, developers will just give a specific example for something they've done using the mentioned technology, and from that, we'll try to find the bigger picture together. I'll generally always try to keep the conversation going, so I may say, okay, so Angular allows you to create a web application that consists of several pages, but looks and feels like it only has one page. That's great, but I can do the same with plain JavaScript, can't I? So why bother with Angular? Or, okay, so that's one thing Angular is good for. What else? This phone call shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. And if I get the impression this developer has an understanding of the bigger picture and has good communication, I'll ask them to proceed to the next step, a face-to-face interview. Here's how I conduct this interview. First, I will try to make the candidate feel comfortable by asking them how the ride was and some background details about themselves in general. After I feel the small talk made them feel comfortable, I'll move on to tell them about the workplace they'll work in, the team, the technologies, and their role specifically. I'll also tell them how the sprint is built very briefly, when we push tasks to higher environments, when they are tested, and how tickets get to production. And also about the business itself, what we do. Then I'll ask them to tell me about themselves. I'll have their resume in front of me, so I won't need them to go into details, just briefly. The next step I'll do is ask them about some challenge they had, or some big feature they took a part in developing. This doesn't have to be after they're done telling about themselves. They could mention it as they talk, and I'll stop them and ask. This also doesn't have to be from a previous workplace. It could be from some other project they took a part in. I'll ask them how they approached that challenge, how they handled being stuck, and if possible, I'll try to understand technically what their solution was and why they chose to solve the issue that way. For instance, why they implemented caching if they didn't have performance issues. As we speak, I'll pay attention to the nuances in what they say, and try to understand their level of familiarity and understanding with the technologies and business domain they worked with. There aren't clearly good or bad answers to any of these questions, but what I'm trying to find is answers to the 3 factors I care about I mentioned earlier. What is their technical level, and more importantly, how high is their motivation, and even more importantly, how intelligent they are. After that, I'll ask them some terms they should be familiar with from their experience with the technologies they worked with. So if it's JavaScript, I would ask them what's a closure, if they're familiar with classes, etc. This will give me an indication about their familiarity with what they work with. Then I'll ask them a more complex question to see how they solve problems and how they understand their technical domain. Here's the question I've used with dozens of junior interviewees. We have a web application that displays education places and students' info. One of the data factors that repeats itself in the students' page, their parents' details page, the education place page, and many more, is the city. So we have the city where the students live, where their parents live, where the education place is, and so on. Currently, we bring the entire cities list for each page, but we suffer from poor performance. How would you suggest we'll improve it? The reason I like this question is that there's much to talk about in it. We can discuss the different types of caching and which is best suited for this scenario. We can discuss what happens if we use cache, but some city's name is changed. How is the cache being updated? And we can also discuss if sending the complete cities list to the client from the first place is a good idea, or is there some better way to let the user choose the city? Obviously, you can choose any question you like, but I think it's important to ask the candidate a tough question and let them try to solve it when you guide them through the process. This will give you a very good indication about how they solve problems, which is key for their success in your team. Finally, I'll give them some hands-on exercise. Since I work as a full-stack team leader, the task I usually give is building a small quiz, often only the client side. This is not a hard task, but the code itself isn't my main indication of what their level of coding is. Furthermore, if I give that task as a home task, I'm certain some developers will just pay someone or ask a friend to do it for them. The reason I still use this approach, other than the fact that I don't believe in very long home tasks, is that the task helps me assess the interviewee's skills when after it's completed, I ask them about what they did. I'll ask them why they did things the way they did and how they will change the code if the requirements are changed. So for instance, how they will build the code if the person taking the quiz gets the score only after he's done, and how they'll build it if he gets feedback after each question. Is it safe to send the correct answer with each question? And if not, what are other ways to complete that requirement? I'll often ask them to show me what they'll change in code and how. I won't ask them to actually write the code, but I want to see they know how to answer those questions. This for me is a good indication for both, that they are the ones who wrote the code from the first place, and that they understand how to solve problems. This is usually enough for me to get a good enough indication as to how the person in front of me will fit in the team and what value will they bring. My methodology for finding the best candidate is based on my experience as a developer, my experience in interviewing dozens of developers, as well as reading and discussing it with others. But as always, I just give you my best advice, but still you might do it differently. Take what suits you best. And this is all for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll accept our candidate to work in our team.